messages I would like to bring to you are partly from the viewpoint of science, of data, information and knowledge, but the second part of my message is linked to the use, misuse, potential misuse, and let's say quality in the sense of inappropriate communication between the producers and users of data. So what we have learned over the last years is that, as you have said, quality from a producer perspective is not enough if there is a misunderstanding between user and producer. So if you have a strong medication, then you would find in the a pharmaceutical product which really can help you, and you open the box, then you would find a little, let's say, piece of paper, and it would say, caution, this is a potent medication. Follow the prescribed schedule exactly to avoid the risk of potentially severe side effects. And I think this is something we need to place on all kind of very strong indicators and strong statistics which might create side effects. So my message is we have a two-sided problem. The one side is the engineering of the data, and the other is the social and policy science type of understanding that we need to improve, and leading to also some ethical and institutional points. So my starting point is this slide. I think for us, at least in official statistics, it's very important that the information, which is powerful knowledge, is created as a kind of facilitation to a decision-making process which is democratic. And therefore, the information is not only given to the direct decision makers on the policy side, but we are bound, even by the Lisbon Treaty, to have a kind of position of neutrality, impartiality, which means that, for example, a press release from Eurostat is not given earlier to the policy DGs than to the public at large. So we try to be extremely neutral, and in a way we want to be policy relevant, however not politically driven. That's a very difficult undertaking, but I think for the quality that Vladimir has mentioned, it's extremely important. So I don't know how to... okay, next slide, yes. This means we need to understand the bridge, how the bridge is constructed, which connects evidence and decision. And it is robust methodological basement. It is clearly defined conceptual framework in terms of scientific sounding and scientific background. If you have, for example, an economic indicator, it should be based on good economic theory. And last but not least, extremely important, clear and easy communication. Now, next slide, please. Well, if we start to understand what indicators and statistics and data are, I think the most important message we get is that we are talking about models of reality. Whatever you have, it is a simplification, and the higher the aggregation and the more or less the condension of information is, and this is when we are talking about indicators or composite indicators, you reduce complexity very much. We have to be aware that this is a model of the reality with partly very, very strong assumption in it, or conventions which are leading then the information. So this is a very important piece of, let's say, understanding of quality. So we have, in the definition of European statistics, we distinguish between basic statistics accounts, I have forgotten this here, and indicator systems or indicators. But of course, the more we aggregate, the less we are really able to show all the details of the real world. Next slide. So, and the starting points for indicators, accounts, and basic statistics, they are coming from different corners of this triangle of quality. So the triangle of quality is we need to be policy relevance. Who decides this? We want to be consistent with a piece of theory. Which theory? And we want to be measurable with good quality, which means reliable, timely, and so forth and so forth. The classical starting point for statistics is basic statistics, so one could say this is a data-driven approach. No, one back, please. Who is? Okay. For accounts, we are starting from a theory. This is mainly national economic accounts, macroeconomic accounts. So macroeconomic theory, Keynes is behind. But more and more, we are also developing other accounts, environmental accounts, social accounts, and so forth. And indicators are mainly policy-driven. So the starting point is a clear need, as Vladimir has said, a request from a decision-making process, and then we are talking about an indicator. But it's very important for me to understand that indicators must not be seen as standalone products. They are the peaks of icebergs, and the more we can connect them to the other pieces of data, the better it is. Next slide. So we need to also ensure that we have a good maintenance. We have seen many indicators which pop up for 1 year, for 2 years, for 5 years, and then they are getting out of fashion. So we need to ensure that the production of these data and information is based on solid ground and it's organized in a sustainable manner. That's why in European statistics we have all these bodies which help us really to construct the data in a big factory. So the factory of European statistics here is, let's say, the decentral production lines in all member states. Altogether, we are talking about some 50,000 statisticians which are producing all these data. So it's a huge machinery, and the huge machinery, it's a liner. Of course, you cannot move the direction of the liner from here to there in a moment, so that's the disadvantage. The advantage is that we are able to maintain a production as expected by policymakers. So next slide, please. And of course, we are standing on the shoulders of giants. So official statistics is a profession which is some 200 years old. And we are now in this blue fourth era of official statistics, where the data around us that we use is rapidly changing, but also the appetite for knowledge and information, as Vladimir has said, is rapidly changing. So the input and the output side is changing. So how could we believe that the throughput, the process, could be unchanged? No, we have to change and we have to adapt and we will adapt to a new way of working, taking into account the data revolution, the globalization, and the request from evidence-based decision-making. Next slide, please. Now, this is extremely important. Goodhart's law. So, Goodhart's law was very visible in 2009, when, after a change in the Greek government, the Greek debt and deficit data were challenged and changed from on the deficit side, it was some 4.5% with the old government, and finally we came to the conclusion that it was 15.7% deficit. And we remember all that this was the trigger which launched and started the financial and sovereign debt crisis. And we are still suffering from this. So bad data are produced whenever you have a feedback loop and between an indicator which creates a political incentive and the behavior of political decision makers. Before the Maastricht Treaty, the debt and deficit indicators were totally unsexy, one could say. Nobody was really interested in it. Through the Maastricht Treaty, the interest of, let's say, big teams of bankers were attracted to go to member states and to help them to bypass to circumvent, let's say, the proper recording of Eurostat. And this is very visible in Goodhart's law. So whenever an indicator really makes a difference, then you create a stress for the indicator. And from the very beginning, you have to be aware that this stress needs to be more or less, you have to protect the machinery against this stress with good governance, institutional arrangements, and so forth. That's what we have learned. Now, you see here this pyramid of official statistics from non-official data up to indicators, and indicators, of course, then can be aggregated to the orange level of composites and dashboards. For all of this, it is important to understand for me that we are in a kind of learning organization and that the indicators are part of this, more or less, system. This is one important condition for the maintenance and the sustainability of production. Next slide. Now, how do we organize production in European statistics? There is first and foremost a system which is a construct introduced by European regulation. So the Council and the Parliament have decided to introduce this production machinery called European Statistical System with all member states and the EEA-EFTA countries. We work with law. So what we do is decided in a democratic way. We have a 5-year program, an annual work program, and some 200 legislative elements which are prescribing the what we are doing, and the how is then decided in the European statistical system. The new challenges are altogether more or less envisaged to be solved with a so-called ESS Vision 2020. This is the commitment that we all have signed up, member states and Eurostat. So by 2020, we want to completely change the machinery of official statistics. Just to give you an example, in 2010 we had the last population census of the classical traditional Emperor Augustus manner. In 2020 we will more or less completely change to a new mode of population census, namely a multiple source mode where all the available data are taken into account in order to produce population and demographic data in a more efficient way, which then can be followed up afterwards on an annual basis with annual updates of demographic data, which is extremely important for migration as we see it now. It's no longer acceptable that we only have proper population data every 10 years. So we are changing this machinery into something more continuous, taking all the data into account. And of course it's very clear, obvious that this takes 4, 5, 6 years preparation to be done properly. We have an ethical code. This is the code of practice. And this leads then to something that we will discuss next week in a seminar, a kind of branding of official statistics with a label, with a quality stamp, which is also easy to communicate to the wider public. So European statistics is clearly defined. It has a legal basis. It is produced by authorities, and it's following this ethical code of good conduct. So I think we can rightly say whenever you get data from Eurostat, they are stamped and they are reliable, and you can trust that these data are based on best available knowledge, information and data. What are the products? Now I'm coming to the last part and just give you some highlights what we produce. Of course you can find everything on our website. We have invested a lot together with member states in dynamic infographics which allow that the user group which is visiting our website, by the way, we have 3 types of users. So we have tourists, we have followers, and we have minors. So the tourists are the normal citizens, and the tourists would come, search for an information, would like to digest it in an easy form, whereas the miner is a professional that is used to work with our complicated data machinery. And then the follower is something in the middle. So we are producing data in, let's say, in a segmented, stratified form for different user groups. Of course, we have publications on all kind of policy domains, like sustainable development, Europe 2020. I will come back later to it. We have started to have training sessions for domains, in particular when it is important that our language is completely and well understood by those who are working in policy DGs. So for the moment, we are in the middle of training sessions given to all DGs, but also to the EIB, for example, in the area of the Juncker investment plan, so as to ensure that there is no misunderstanding that a proper statistical recording is counter-innovative or blocking innovation, which is not the case. But there is a lot of misunderstanding out there, and we are investing a hell lot of time to really get this fixed. For indicators, we have started 2 years ago with methodological, more or less, manuals on communication, on typologies, terminologies, and so forth, and we will continue to do this together also with the OECD and the UN ECE. Next slide. Just to give you a couple of, let's say, examples for what our publications do. We have an annual monitoring report on the Europe 2020, macro imbalances procedures. We are producing in November an MIP report in close link with, in particular, DG ECFIN and the ECB. Last year we have published a report on quality of life indicators, which is the subjective form of well-being, and so forth and so forth. Next slide. This is our website, so it's full of information, but I think it was relaunched last year, and I'm quite convinced, based on the feedback I've got, that it is easy to handle for whatever kind of user group you are. Next one. Statistics Explained is something like a wiki for statistical domains. So you can go and you will certainly find, let's say, in easy language, in non-statistical jargon, domains explained with all the connections to indicators, accounts, and basic statistics. Next, please. We have had last year in a conference which is called DGINS. This is the abbreviation of Directeur Général d'Institut National Statistique. Our yearly meeting on indicators for decision-making and monitoring, and we have signed a Lisbon memorandum which outlines the action plan for the next years, and I will come back to one or two of the actions in the next slides. Next, please. So, we are trying to close the data gaps and, in particular, improve the timeliness of data. As we know, economic data are very timely, so we get monthly data, but when it comes to social or environmental knowledge, there is a lagging behind, in particular, of poverty data, inequality data, and environmental data. What we try to do now is, with the help of the use of other available data sources, but also with modeling, to interpolate, or to partly also to extrapolate, and to create flash estimates for poverty, for example, just to give you an example. We connect with geospatial information. The big event will be the population census, where all, let's say, information about population, housing, will be geo-coded as of 2020. So that will allow us really to have also something like small area estimation, where we can break down the bigger pieces of information for, let's say, regions, also to urban areas, and so forth and so forth, which is urgently needed from our colleagues, in particular from DG Regio. But more is needed, and here we have a lot of question marks, and the cooperation with JRC and research colleagues is extremely urgent for us. Modeling and composite indicators. For us, it's a question of how far can we go and should we go. And here there is a point of, let's say, handover. And it was clearly explained and visible in the way we cooperated 2 years ago in the index on fast-growing enterprises and competitiveness, where we have delivered all the ingredients of basic data, and then JRC came and constructed a kind of meaningful, best possible composite indicator. So I think there is a complementarity of the two services, and I'm happy to be able to participate today in this event. How to integrate new sources. Big data are noisy data. To get the signal out is something we have to learn, and this is very important to be done together. There is a conference or a seminar organized in ISPRA, I think next week or the week after next week, where JRC and Eurostat are putting their, let's say, smart people together in order to understand what we could do together. How to ensure quality, I think this is more on our side, our strength. We have learned a lot about how to ensure quality assurance system, and how to communicate that you have good quality. But again, here the future might also have to integrate new components. Next slide, please. And last but not least, it's about literacy. Literacy means at all levels that we are, of course, observing this data revolution, the data deluge. However, we have sometimes the feeling that there is a kind of fast food mentality, and that the knowledge about data, information and knowledge, and about quality is not, let's say, developing in the same speed as the data are developing. So we all get on our iPhones or whatever kind of, we get information about that at 10 o'clock tomorrow morning we will have a 28% precipitation probability, but nobody knows what it is. We get for football all the scoring and all the dashboards, but we fail to understand what really is behind. So there is some intuition, but I think together we have really to invest in educating the normal citizen, but also the people coming to the Commission to understand what good quality is. It's like with food. So if we have only a fast food mentality, then we can do whatever we want on the production side. Nobody will buy our expensive 3 étoiles Guide Michelin cuisine, as long as the users go to the McDonald's around the corner. So I think that's extremely important for us. It's core business for European statistics, and we will invest much more. We will have to invest much more in the future. All of this is, of course, under the resource constraints we all know. But we do our best, and I think that's the end of my little story. No, the action plan, I leave it here, then you can have a look. So the action plan is indicator methodology and policy use. It's about indicator sets, and it's about communication and training. This is wrapping up what I've said. Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks a lot, Walter, for this insightful and very rich presentation.